it's all so confusing why they think this is going to be the front office to lead a retool, because everything from the last now 10 years says otherwise.
One of the most, I would say, encyclopedic hockey people when it comes to today. You got your Merricks, who if you say, hey, did you see the Canadiens game last night? He'll say, I saw everything the Canadiens have ever done. Say to Shayna Goldman, see the Canadiens game last night. She's going to have like 9 jokes about this Canadiens team that we didn't think of. Hi, Shayna.
Hi. Wow, what an intro. An honor to be thought of that way. It's really great that knowing that I can make bullshit up, like it has a sticking point.
No, I mean, your thing from early in the season and I complimented you for it like 15 times, but this is the same Oilers storyline every year. That was when I was like, all right, Shayna will handle the humor around here, okay? Let's talk Sharkies, okay? Because they traded 2 seconds for Kiefer Sherwood yesterday. Do you like the fit, and do you think the Sharks, with where they're going right now, should be buying?
Okay, I really like the fit, and let me preface it by saying, I feel like I sound like a hypocrite because I literally wrote about Kiefer Sherwood a week ago saying, I don't think he makes sense for a team that's not a true contender, because I think a contender can maximize his game, put him in a middle six role, and you're not counting on him to be, I don't know, a 40-goal scorer, which we've seen he can't be, even if he starts the season at that pace. Having said all of that, the Sharks are in a different position because to me, they can do whatever the hell they want right now, and it's totally okay. They have gathered a ton of assets over the years. They have a ton of young guns. They have, up-and-coming talent. But you also need veterans, and you also just need guys who are exciting and interesting who can complement their core. So I feel like it works here, right? They're not looking at him going, this is the final piece to make us a playoff team. I think the Bruins or the Rangers a couple weeks ago might have felt that way, and it's like, okay, what are you seeing with your team right now? But it's who's someone who can punch this team up and do a little bit of everything? It's Kiefer Sherwood, and I absolutely love it for them.
That's kind of where I am. Yeah, I mean, it's. I do think that Sherwood is the type of player who makes a perfect final piece. And I was like, would a team like the Lightning go out and get Kiefer Sherwood? Because it seems like a perfect fit for the type of players that they like to add mid-season. But also, the Sharks need that edge. They need that grit. They need that just another good player. And they need a little bit more seriousness to them, and I am so excited to watch Kiefer Sherwood over there.
What do you make of the Sharks in relation to, I guess, what I'll call the non-sure things in the Western Conference playoff race? Because the Sharks have a playoff spot right now, but 3 of these teams, I said earlier in the show, 3 of these teams will probably get in. The Sharks, the Ducks, the Mammoth, the Kraken, the Kings, and possibly, wild as it sounds, the Predators. What do you make of that landscape, and who do you take seriously?
I think when you think about how bad, let's just call a spade, how bad the Pacific is, the Sharks could actually do it this year, which is wild to think. But I think they've built up enough goodwill for us to start actually believing in them. And do we think that they're going to do much in the postseason? Probably not. But I think there's a big difference between that team getting into the postseason, getting some experience, and not necessarily thinking they're somewhere they're not. I think we see all the time teams make the playoffs and they're like, actually, we're good now. And we're going to start buying because we made the playoffs. And then they completely shoot themselves in the foot. I don't think that's happening here, even though they just bought. Because again, how many draft picks are you going to have, honestly, if you're the Sharks? They've done a great job collecting them, flipping players for them. You look at the CC trade or Granlund and how they were able to maximize the returns, that I think it gives them the leeway to do it. So why not get some experience and then just keep on trucking here and just trending up? I actually like them. I truly hope they make it.
When we headed into the season, I think a lot of people looked at the Sharks and they were like, probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league this season. That is certainly not the case right now. When you look across the league and you kind of evaluate where some teams are, which team has the bleakest outlook? And it's probably the Vancouver Canucks, right?
It's definitely the Vancouver Canucks. And while they deserve credit for changing the tone, a couple weeks ago, you're hearing accelerated rebuild and hybrid rebuild. And it's okay, stop. To me, that is the faultiest strategy you could possibly have. You're either rebuilding or retooling. Pick a lane and stick with it. So now that they're okay, it's a rebuild. It's great. You're honest with yourself on where you are. You move Quinn Hughes. You got a good return back, as good as you're going to get. You're always going to be the loser in that trade. But all right, you did it. But then I just look at the front office and go, are you the team? Are you this group of humans to turn this team back into a playoff caliber roster, even if they keep selling off? No, I just don't see it. I think the vibes are putrid there, that they have the worst outlook for sure.
So you think that there's like the well is poisoned there? Like they need to make wholesale changes before there is any reason to believe in the future there?
Absolutely, yes. And they're not the only team out there that I think that with. Like, I don't know, look over at the New York Rangers they're going to retool with that front office. Like, I think when you have that deep of root problems, you're screwed from day one. Like, can you evolve and change and, shake things up and prove us all wrong? Absolutely, sure. But I don't think either team has a strong enough track record to believe that's going to happen anytime soon.
So do you not believe in like the expedited retool instead of rebuild strategy at all?
What the Bruins are trying to do?
But I mean, like the Bruins have done it somewhat effectively, but I think that the question that often comes up with that sort of mindset is, okay, what is the ceiling with this expedited retool? Because like right now, I think that people look at the Bruins and you look at the front office and what they've done, and you can give them credit for a lot of the moves that they've made, but still at the end of the day, their ceiling is not a true Stanley Cup contender, at least not right now. So where do you kind of balance the, like, well, you can be competitive in a couple of years, but can you actually push that ceiling up to a Stanley Cup contender? Do you believe in the idea of a retool over a rebuild?
I believe in rebuilds. I believe in retools. I don't believe in an accelerated rebuild, because I think if you're rebuilding, you're blowing up your core. If you're retooling, you're keeping a couple pieces to build around, right? For the Bruins, it's Swayman, Pastrnak, and McAvoy. And there's much worse starting point you could have, right? You think of so many teams around the league. I would even put the Capitals in that group. When they started their retool, it was an aging John Carlson, an aging Alex Ovechkin, and they still pulled it off. Now, in a lot of cases, the faster you rise, the harder you fall, and you're just kind of doomed from the start. I don't necessarily feel that way with the retool. Like, I look at what the Islanders are doing right now, and I think they're becoming that next cool example that we've been using the Capitals for a couple of years. Maybe the Islanders are going to take this one over. And they traded Brock Nelson. Then they traded Noah Dobson, which was a bold move that I don't think a lot of us saw coming, because that's a player you would think would be a part of a retool. But you go through Scott Wheeler's prospect tiers, 122 players. They have 4 to 5 players now in those rankings. 4 of those players were not with the organization before they started retooling. So they're doing it that quickly. And you see players like Cal Ritchie and, they're drafting Aitchison and Eklund. Obviously, they got lucky and they got Schaefer. You need luck to make a rebuild, a retool, or an accelerated rebuild work too. But I just think the Bruins are on that retool path more so because they kept their core in place. So maybe it could work. But I'm just a little worried what they're going to do from this point forward, right? Because you have one really strong deadline of tearing enough down without completely blowing it up. They didn't get the highest end pieces back, but it was a good start. I think you need to sell again this year and be realistic, but I could totally see the Bruins being that team that's like, we're close enough to the playoffs, we can buy. And that's why I thought Sherwood was going to end up there, honestly. And they just jump ahead when they're not ready to do that yet. I think you can retool if you're really, really, really smart, but you have to be aggressive and keep it tight in that timeline.
And you definitely don't need to do what Chicago has done or what San Jose's done. Like, San Jose has definitely leaned into the strip it down to the studs, just get as many high picks as possible. But unless I'm mistaken, and correct me if I'm being an absolute idiot here, there's 3 teams that have 2 top 10 players: the Avalanche, the Oilers, and I would say the Minnesota Wild. And Oilers did it that way of sucking, even if they weren't trying to do it. Avalanche did it that way of sucking. I think they were trying to do it. Minnesota Wild hit on a draft pick, which, I mean, you're not always just going to conjure up Kirill Kaprizov out of thin air, but they traded a guy they drafted in the top 10, which is they were bad to have that pick, but they weren't bottom of the league, go through a total rebuild in order to flip Zeev Buium to get Quinn Hughes. So there is more than one way to do it. And the way of just go to the bottom of the league, get as many high draft picks as possible. Sean, I don't need to say earmuffs. It's been Sabres fans can tell you that that's not tried and true. It's tried and sometimes true, but it's also tried and often infuriating because of the point that you raised, Shayna, which is, are you the human to make that trade? Are you the human to make that pick? And it's something that I've asked about Don Sweeney as the Bruins try to do this retool thing. But between how Minnesota has gotten where they are and how Washington was able to kind of maneuver the last couple of years, I think that you can do a retool. But you're right, Shayna, like the whole like we're going to rebuild in 1 year thing does not work. You're just going to have a weird flotsam and jetsam roster that probably is then going to get bad again in 2 years. But then because you probably bought at a deadline to get into the playoffs, you're not going to have picks anymore.
Yeah, and I think when you decide to retool, if you fuck it up, which we see happen all the time, you're forcing yourself into rebuilds. Now you're extending your timeline. The other part of it is you need to be smart enough to know when to start your retool, right? Like you need to be aggressive enough. You look at the Capitals, I think they were 2 points out of a playoff spot in 2023 when they stepped back and started selling at the deadline. They were teams in between, the wild card and where the Capitals were. So, it wasn't as close as maybe it looks on the surface, but you have to say, okay, we're pulling ourselves out of it. You think of the Blues back in 2018 when they sold, they were right there in the playoff picture. And they were like, you know what? We're actually not good enough. And they moved Paul Stastny. And then that summer they got Ryan O'Reilly. And, obviously theirs is a little bit different because they ended up in last place and turned it around in a year. And nobody's doing that. But I think you just need to know when to actually start it. Because so many times we see teams, they start slipping. And then at the last minute, they're like, you know what? We should retool. And it's like, if you had gone about that a little bit more proactively a year or two ago, absolutely, yes. But if not, now you're just screwing yourself from day one and you're probably going to be forced into, a rebuild or just a lot of shitty years in the mushy middle.
When you look at the Rangers, how badly do you think that they fucked up their situation? Because they've got to be like one of the more confusing teams in the league in terms of their trajectory and even like the JT Miller of it all and naming him captain. And I just don't know where this team is going or what the reasons are to believe in this team in any direction that they may have.
I think if they were smart, they would have started a retool last year. They would have been like, you know what, this isn't it. And yes, they sold at the deadline last year, but I'm not even counting that as part of the retool because they didn't do anything with it, right? Like they went for players they thought they needed, the Will Borgens of the world, the let's be hard to play against and very defensive, but have no mobility, no skating, no skill, no nothing, right? Like that's what they opted for. It didn't work. And now they're here again. I get it. Like nobody thought the season would go off the rails because on paper, moving out contracts like Trouba's, like Barclay Goodrow, like Chris Kreider, and not having to retain anything is a win. And on the surface, when we saw the trades happen, I think a lot of us were like, okay, that's actually good. But what are you going to do with that opened up space? And they've shot themselves in the foot every time. The JT Miller of it all is the most confusing part of it because it's like conflicting philosophies. If you're trading a first round pick, and I get it, the price of JT Miller was lower than it could have been when the Rangers acquired him, but you're going for a win now move, thinking he's going to patch all the holes that formed, and then it sets them back even further. Like here it is, they sold last year and their first draft pick in 2025 was 43rd overall. The other part of it is with this team deciding to retool, it's who is running the retool because Chris Drury does not have a great track record for drafting and developing talent. And this goes further than just his 5 years as general manager. Like, I think when he was hired in 2015, he was the director of player development. Then he was the general manager of the Hartford Wolfpack. So they have no system in place to maximize the players that they bring into this organization. And yes, it falls on the players to do everything they can to become the best versions of themselves, but you also need a little bit more leadership here. So it's all so confusing why they think this is going to be the front office to lead a retool because everything from the last now 10 years says otherwise.
How do you feel about what the Flames are doing right now? Like, do you think that they got good value for Rasmus Andersson, knowing that they can also probably get something for Zach Whitecloud? The chat is just like asking all sorts of questions about the Flames being like, what are we even supposed to call what they're doing? I know that they care about opening up a new building and having the team be good then, but like, if you're aiming to be good by a certain time, you're probably going to miss. What do you make of what they're doing?
They're kind of confusing because if I remember correctly, they were calling it a retool for like the last year or two, and it feels more like a rebuild. I don't think their situation's been easy because to move out rentals is always tough. And I think what hurt the Flames was it was very obvious where the players they were moving wanted to go, right? With Noah Hannafin knowing he would sign an extension somewhere, but nowhere else, absolutely crushed their leverage. And I think with Rasmus Andersson, last year it's reported like he wants to go to Vegas. If you're Vegas, you don't have to offer anything then because you could say he's either going to choose if they're fixated on that whole like sending him to a place he's going to want to extend to try to like juice the return. You can either wait for the Flames to strike out everywhere else or you could just sign him in free agency, which Vegas is great at doing. So they open it up that it's Boston who can talk to him about a contract extension and Vegas who can't. So if Boston can't figure out a contract dealing, he's going to Vegas. So their return was never going to be as high as it should have been for, I mean, a player of his caliber, right? Like a top 4 right-handed defenseman. I know he's not like the shiniest defenseman out there. He's not the flashiest, but those kinds of defensemen have value, and general managers love players like that can just eat big minutes and be counted on in any situation. I feel like they haven't gotten enough back for the players they've moved, but I also think the circumstances have made it even more challenging. So I think, honestly, they need to keep tearing it down a little bit. Like the Nazem Kadri of it all, I don't know how long you wait to move him either, especially when he's still playing so well, and just admit it's a rebuild, but it's tougher to sell in certain markets, and there's other, things going on in the background, like you mentioned, the new building that might stop a team from just admitting that's what's going on.
Where do you stand on the New Jersey Devils? Because we've been waiting for a few years at this point for them to take that big next step, and it seems like they've been knocking on the door, but every year it's either bad luck, it's bad injuries, it's can't get a save. There's always an excuse for something going wrong in New Jersey. At what point do we just look at that team and go, they're not going to do it as currently constructed or as currently led?
Cursed. They're cursed, honestly. This year, the injuries were a part of it, but I think they just started trending so far down the second Brett Pesce got hurt. Like, it was before Jack Hughes got hurt that you kind of saw their defensive game just plummet. And Nico Hischier, his game, after he had a great start, that started trending down. And then Jack Hughes gets hurt. Then you see all of the issues we knew they had with secondary scoring, and it just isn't getting better. I think that they came into the year with roster holes that should have been solved this summer. They should have boosted their bottom 6. I like the addition of Connor Brown, and I think it was tweaks here or there that were good, but I just don't think they did it enough. And then they extend Markstrom early, which made absolutely no sense, honestly, based on the way he was playing, his age. And I get it's only a 2-year deal, but it just feels like the priorities are all wrong. So, it suck for them. They missed out on Quinn Hughes, but the team shouldn't be so fragile that derails, a tough season even more. I will give Tom Fitzgerald credit. As much as we dunked on him for having this media roundtable to sit down about the Devils' problems, I think it's better that he's the one that sits there and faces the music versus, I don't know, Chris Drury hiding behind a perfectly curated letter. I think there's a big difference there, and I think the general manager needs to be front-facing. But it just feels like everything he's done in the last 1 or 2 years has gone completely south. Like, to hire Sheldon Keefe, I don't think the playing style is good enough for what this roster brings. I think they're suppressing what makes them so special. Sure, you might not feel you could win the Stanley Cup and thrive in the playoffs with a really great rush game and nothing more. Why not build more dimension to your attack? The Panthers did it. That worked. But also you can't throw away everything that made them special. You can't go into the season and go, let's just figure out the 3C situation, right? Like, Eric Howell is gone, but who's going to play there long term? Cody Glass has a lot of durability issues. I don't know if you can count on him, especially when you're on a team that is so cursed as the Devils. But it's just even more perplexing because Dawson Mercer isn't trusted to play center. So then he should be kept on the wing. And it just feels like there's all these obvious spots for them to address. And I know it sounds easy on paper and then you go to the trade market and it doesn't always work out. But they haven't done much of anything to fix the roster. So now you throw Dougie Hamilton to the fire, and I don't think he deserves it. I don't think he's been as great offensively, but he's been pretty damn good in matchup minutes when that's generally not his role. The Luke Hughes contract is aging poorly, and he's going to get more attention because of his name, and now the Quinn Hughes of it all. I don't know. I feel like they need a reset, and it feels like from the top, and it feels like if they act on it sooner, like they can still salvage this season, but the more time passes, the more it feels like you have to punt it to next season.
Chat is an absolute party right now. They're oddly staying on topic. Every team that we bring up, they have a lot of insults for that team that they want to get in there. There's also allegations that we're just having a little party where we only talk about mid-teams. I'd love to continue it by saying, I'm watching the Blues the other night, and I told Pete this. We talked about the offer sheets a lot. Probably for reasons of me not being able to shut the fuck up about them. But I feel like everybody talked about the offer sheets a lot. And I was watching them the other night, and Dylan Holloway was returning for the Blues, and that's great. We want him to be healthy. Philip Broberg is a really good young player. I'm watching the Blues, and I'm like, we don't talk about what if they didn't do that? What would this roster be like? This roster is so bad. What would the Blues be if they didn't do that? That was viewed as this big stealth, like, oh no, he didn't thing by Armstrong. And now I look at the Blues and I'm like, oh, you had to do that. What do you make of the Blues?
Yeah, they had to do that. And maybe the biggest thing was right before they went after the offer sheets, if I remember correctly, they announced that Armstrong was extended till like 2030. And it's like, what are we doing here? Because I don't think he earned that. And then they already have a succession plan in place. And it's like, things change a lot. Had they not gone for the 2 offer sheets, I think you would have wanted to change in management. I think the team would have been that bad and they would have needed to make bigger changes than just on the roster. Like, I don't think that he could have been trusted to do it. But the offer sheets, we all talked about a lot because, first of all, we love the chaos. They're sick. They're amazing. We need to see more teams do it. They're spiteful. And it worked out really well here because, like you said, Holloway's a good player. Broberg's a good shutdown defenseman. But I think we saw this past offseason, like, why we all had those questions about Blues management in the past, because they did literally nothing. They did nothing or nothing good. Like, the Bolduc trade, I think, was, a total misstep. And I just felt like they could have built on their momentum way more, like a team like Montreal did, because Montreal made the playoffs and they didn't just go, oh, we're in the playoffs, let's just start buying. It was like calculated and measured moves of players in their timelines, like Noah Dobson, like Bolduc. Like, it made so much sense. The Blues should have had an offseason like that. They didn't. So now they're back here again to the drawing board where it feels like they have too many long-term contracts. The blue line is not strong enough. The goaltending situation is a damn mess. And I don't think the coaching's perfect either. Like, I think that Jim Montgomery, to me, it feels like he was good to put in that defensive structure, but I don't know if he's the right coach to build them up offensively either. Like, the roster is part of the problem, but I think the coaching style isn't helping either. So they really need to get to work, but it's kind of impossible to say what that work is, right? Because now you're seeing names like Kyrou and Thomas pop up on trade boards. So if you're moving them now, it's a full rebuild, not a retool. But do you have any other good trade pieces to move if you're St. Louis that can actually thread the needle and get this roster to a better point, like a better place? I'm not sure.
Yeah, being the team that goes from trading for and signing Cam Fowler, all the love in the world to Cam Fowler, to the team that's selling off their core in the course of a year. Rough stuff, folks. Do you have any other mid teams you want to ask about?
Let's see. I did
We
want
can
to
throw the
ask.
Flyers in there or something.
I mean, I did want to ask about like, where do we go with the Winnipeg Jets now?
Ooh.
Because the Winnipeg Jets, obviously a year removed from being really, really fun, really interesting, and now they're one of the worst teams in the league, although they have been a little bit better as of late. And you can, the goaltending, their team's only going to go as far as the goaltending. But one-line team, basically, in terms of their offensive production, like, is it time to pull the plug on what the Jets are trying to do, and where do they go from there?
Yeah, probably. I think that they're a team that if they start retooling right now, maybe can save themselves a little bit. Because I think Josh Morrissey, Hellebuck, Kyle Connor, it's not a bad core to go with. It's not the strongest because I think the forward group is like your weak link. But, Perfetti plus Scheifele plus Connor, like, you could probably make it work. But they were not a good enough team last season, despite their record. And I think it really showed in the playoffs that their offense was not where it needed to be. Like, the defensive structure was there. The goaltending was there. But, like, in that series against the Stars, the offense was completely dried up. And it showed what this team needed to do over the summer. They lose the others, don't replace him. I know they thought Perfetti, a Perfetti breakout season could replace him, but you should have wanted both of those players. The center situation still just sucked. And, Jonathan Taves had a really rough start. Shocker. 37-year-old who hasn't played in a couple years is not coming in as a 2C, and he's been better as of late. But it just felt like there were too many weak points. And I think the biggest problem here is that management has taken way too passive of an approach in seasons past. And you could look at it two ways in the Central Division. You could buy and mortgage your future just to get crushed by the Avs and Stars. And that is not the best strategy. I get it. That's what the Wild are doing, right? They're going for Quinn Hughes. They're going balls to the wall for 2 years. They don't care. They're going to go for it. Or you could sit on your hands and do literally nothing, get crushed by those teams, and then have a shitty outlook. Which path do you want to take? I would take the more interesting one and at least give it a shot while Connor Hellebuck is Connor Hellebuck and while Josh Morrissey is like a Norris caliber defenseman. And they just missed the boat on doing that. Like, season after season, you look at last deadline, Dallas and Colorado are buying and having an arms race in the Central, and the Jets are like, you know what, we're good. We are good with where we're at. We're going to keep it to minimal changes. And that's where everything went wrong. Had they changed it last year, I think maybe they would have been better positioned this year. But instead, it's more of the same. And now the same is pretty damn shitty. So they have to really amp things up right now or just start tearing it down. Like, there's no in between at this point.
It is very funny because I feel like for the last 10 years, every single year we've looked at the Winnipeg Jets and they've been like standing naked in the streets screaming that they need a second line center. And they get these patchwork centers that maybe last for 6 months and then they're right back to being naked in the street begging for a second line center.
I think it's because they probably see other teams do that with other positions. Like Florida Panthers every year have a defenseman on their roster who is like 90 years old and is like has been bought out by a previous team and is on the minimum or whatever and is just like hey, can you like hold down a like second or third pairing spot, and they're able to do it. And they're just like, oh, we can do the same thing with a far more important position. Or it could be the Winnipeg problem that always exists, which is we don't currently have this guy. How do we get this guy?
Yeah, it's not a good position to be in. And the other teams, like you mentioned, the Panthers, you could even say to the Canes to an extent, their system is greater than just like the X's and O's on the ice. Like it is the whole strategy. It's the whole vibe. When you build a system like that, you can just keep plugging in players around your elite core. And the Panthers have the edge of their core being elite above the rest. But even like the Canes, you have a couple cornerstones to help keep everything the way it should be and keep everything clicking. And you can just add in players around it and see what cooks. The Jets have not built that system. As good as their defensive structure was last year, it's like year one of a good strategy. It's, it just isn't there yet. So you don't have the goodwill to just bring in players and going like, this guy will be good here. Like, no, Vlad Namestnikov as 2C last year wasn't it. That should be your utility player who can float around the lineup. A guy like Iafallo is the same, but you need one really strong player there to just keep things down on the second line so you can keep interchanging the rest.
What if the Blue Jackets, their spark, they are the new hottest team in hockey. What if the Blue Jackets spark fades and Charlie Coyle, you don't want as a second line center, but the Jets are so out of it now though that I'm like, you're not buying for this year anyway. So withdrawn.
Last one from me. Given that we're talking about all these rebuilding, retooling teams that really need something good in the draft, are you still a believer in Gavin McKenna being a solution or the solution for any of these teams? There's some Stenberg chat in the chat, and I've become a massive Ivar Stenberg guy.
So I think that if you want to build your team up, you need top picks, right? Like you go through player tiers this year and how many players are acquired through free agency, and that number is shrinking every year. And via trade, I think it was 40 players out of the top 150. 91 players, if I remember the math right, was through the draft and through development. And that's how you get the best players in the world, right? And a lot of them happen to be first round picks. A lot of them are top 5 picks. But you also can have a bunch of guys later in the first round. So I think if you have a McKenna or Stenberg, and even if they're not the generational first overall picks and second overall picks that we see some years, because guys like McDavid have just raised the bar so much. It's so hard for everyone else. And now it's Celebrini doing the same thing. For every Celebrini, you might have an Alexis Lafreniere. It's a really tough line to walk, but you still want to get that top end talent. If you can get a top 5 pick, that's going to do a lot for your franchise. If you can help that player become the best version of themselves, which we're seeing is the difference between Celebrini and Lafreniere to an extent. Like, yes, the skill sets are different, the ceilings were different, but also the Sharks are doing a lot to make sure like this player becomes a star while the Rangers did not. So if you're retooling or rebuilding, it literally to me doesn't matter who you're drafting in the top 5 if they're, the perceived top players of that draft. It's what you do with them after you draft them. Like, are they the cornerstone you're building around? Are you prioritizing their development? And if you become good, are you still prioritizing their development, right? Because we see retooling teams, you have to walk this fine line between player development and winning now, and that can be the toughest part of it. But you have to hire the right coach, and you still need to have a good developmental system that you're walking that line and making sure both things are happening at the same time. It's really hard to do, but hey, the best teams manage it. You look, again, go back to the Caps, the Protuses, the McMichaels of the world, they prioritize their developments over the years that now they're difference makers. So if you're starting with an even higher end player who's drafted top 5, you should be able to do it. But Not everyone does.
Last thing I want to hit with you, Jason Robertson and Nick switched agents over the weekend, or it was reported over the weekend by Elliot Friedman, now represented by Andy Scott of Octagon, who our show knows as Leon Draisaitl's North American agent, but I think Stars fans should know as representing Mikko Rantanen, Wyatt Johnston, and Thomas Harley, all of whom have signed long-term extensions with the team over the last year. There have been a lot of Jason Robertson questions going back to since Jason Robertson entered the league, even taking out the Olympic snubs of it, what this guy's future is. He's an RFA at the end of the season. He's got one more year before he would become a UFA. It seems like he's trying to stay with Dallas, which I think Dallas should be trying to keep that guy. But what do you think this means? And what do you think he gets? Like, do you think that they'll have an internal cap, which I hate and always tell fans, don't buy that. If your team says they have an internal cap, they're trying to cheap out. But Rantanen makes 12, and Jason Robertson on a long-term deal probably should command somewhere around there. What do you think happens?
Yeah, I think internal caps are bullshit, but teams have them, and like it's just the way it is. And if they view Rantanen as that, I understand it to an extent because, you know, championship caliber guy, really good in the playoffs. Robertson doesn't have the same reputation, but Robertson is signing the contract a little bit younger, and the market has changed in the last year. Like already it's changed because if guys like Kyle Connor, who it's a tier below, full tier below Mikko Rantanen, I would say Robertson should probably get the same there. But I could still see it being a more team-friendly deal. And I think the change in agents might be the thing that kind of smooths that out too, because maybe you can figure out a way to structure it more favorably, even if you're not getting the cap hit that you have earned. But it's in the Stars' best interest to keep him. Like, it's ridiculous to think anything else because this team is in their window right now. I get it. They could get a haul back for Jason Robertson, but is anything that they're going to get back going to make them a better version of the team that they have in place right now? Probably not. Not right now. Could it extend their window? Maybe, right? Like if you go younger and we look at how the Canes did it with, you know, getting a player like Logan Stankoven, and you're like, wow, he could be a part of this team for the next 8 years. So could Jason Robertson. This is not a 29, 30-year-old. So I think that makes it a little bit different too. But the Stars, it would be one thing to say, let's extend the window if they had championships. They don't. So they're still trying to get past that third round. I don't think you do something like moving him out. I don't care what the return is. Like, he makes their team better now and in the near future. And that should be priority number one.
Okay, Shayna, thank you very much for joining us. We kept you probably too long, but we always love chatting with you. Chat, a huge fan of all you bringing to the table, really, because the first 25 minutes of this was us just saying team, and then you saying a bunch of shit about it, and it was very good. Easy on our end. You can hear Shayna on the Too Many Men podcast, which is amazing, strong recommendation, and also read her on The Athletic. Thank you very much, Shayna.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to What Chaos here on YouTube. You will get everything, daily episodes, player interviews, and so much more. It's all here on the What Chaos YouTube. Hit subscribe.